This is an overview of People Analytics, solving business challenges with employee data. My name is Colleen Flaherty Manchester, and I'm an associate professor at the Carlson School of Management. Today, you can't spend a day in business without hearing the word analytics. In HR, this is also true. We're surrounded by vast amounts of employee-level data, and the question becomes, what can and should we do with it? People Analytics is about solving business challenges using employee-level data, keeping in mind the potentially sensitive nature of those data. People Analytics roles and functions are on the rise in organizations today, yet many companies continue to face challenges in their People Analytics strategy. Two common approaches limit an organization's ability to leverage its people data. The first is the abundance approach, or more is better. This type of approach bogs down People Analytics individuals with continual data requests that lack purpose and motivation for actually taking action. The second is a hesitancy to build People Analytics capabilities, perhaps out of uneasiness about what data insights may provide or confusion over where to begin. The key insight I stress in this course is People Analytics is not about HR, it's about the business. So why does this matter? Well, first, it provides focus and purpose for your People Analytics strategy, allowing you to push back on data requests that are not core to your business. The second is buy-in from key audiences, including leaders who are the decision makers over resources, as well as employees who often will be involved in your data collection strategies supporting People Analytics. Third, by connecting your People Analytics strategy to the business, you're going to set yourself up for generating data insights that are going to be actionable. In analytics, you'll often hear the phrase that insight without action is just overhead. This is also true for HR and People Analytics. So how do we build a People Analytics strategy? Well, first you need to start with a business objective. What is the business trying to solve? However, that's not going to be enough because for People Analytics, the key is for thinking about employee data. So you need to buttress that business objective with HR's role in supporting that objective. With this backdrop, you'll be able to help state the problem or challenge you're trying to solve using employee data. The next two steps are really about thinking forward about taking action. This involves who is the audience. This will be relevant for not only data collection, but most importantly, how to actually take action from any insights you generate from the data. The last part about will the insights be actionable, this is a key step for your consideration, because if the likely action item is not going to have support in the organization, going through the steps for that People Analytics project is not going to be worthwhile. So when you have the People Analytics strategy, what do you do next? Well, implementation phase is what you need to consider. So implementation involves data as well as data analysis and visualization. So for data collection, it involves data sources and data infrastructure. So going back to identifying the problem you're trying to solve, that should point you to the data sources you need to provide insight on that problem. Here I recommend you use caution in not over-collecting data. Really think hard about what are the key elements for generating insight so that you only collect enough data that you need. If you end up collecting more and more data, it'll just bog down your analysis process. Once you've identified the sources, the next step is thinking about the data infrastructure. So where is this data stored? And if it's going to be an ongoing request, what processes need to be in place and what infrastructure need to be in place so that data could be codified for later extraction. The next step is data visualization and analysis. This again will go back to who the audience is, as well as what insight you're hoping to gain. By working backwards from the insight and the likely action, you can better inform the type of data analysis and visualization you'll need to help you support and better understand what actions are necessary. So let's take a look at a use case example to better understand how to develop a strategy as well as execute implementation in practice.
Okay, so let's see what this looks like to bring this people analytics strategy to action. I'm going to go through a use case for an organization who's interested in targeting its inclusive culture. So thinking about our different buckets, we first need to think about what is the business objective. For this organization, they set out fostering an inclusive culture as a key business objective. This involves the culture and environmental aspects of their workplace, as well as their diversity in terms of representation. Next, we need to think about, well, what's HR's role in helping to achieve that business objective? Well, HR is going to be in charge of managing and supporting managers as they implement and support an inclusive workplace. So with this background of fostering inclusive culture as a business objective and HR helping to manage and support that objective, what problem is this organization trying to solve? They're actually looking at where should they target their diversity inclusion training efforts towards managers. So the question becomes where to target DE&I efforts within the organization, given that there could be variation across business areas or functions or even managers in terms of where support is needed. The next step to consider is more forward-looking, which is who is the audience and will action be able to take place? These two steps are critical in thinking about how to set up your data analysis in order to gain insight. So for the audience, that is going to be senior managers, because they're the ones on the ground helping to create an inclusive environment. But it's also going to be employees, because they are going to be part of your data collection strategy. Will this data analytics strategy lead to action? Well, this is a key question you need to ask partners within your organization, because if no action is going to be taking place, then all this effort will be wasted. So what will this organization be interested in taking? Well, for this organization, they're interested in training, support, and other types of initiatives such as diversity inclusion summits and conferences within the organization. So once we have our people analytics strategy, we need to transition to implementation. So for this use case and thinking about fostering an inclusive culture, the data sources that we need to focus on have to be around the environment of inclusion. And so because we're interested in the employee experience, a really great data source for this is employee level measures of the climate of their work group. And so we're going to achieve this using a survey of employees, getting at their attitudes and reports of inclusive climate. The key aspect for making this into, or tying this, I should say, into the business strategy is actually connecting this to the organization. So connecting this to the organization structure in a way that we can identify employees within managers so we can target, again, our diversity and inclusion support strategies. So now that we've identified the data sources, we need to think about where those data are stored. So for the survey, that's going to be new data that we generate. So let's just indicate that here with this new color. So the survey is going to be new data And we're going to connect to existing data on organizational records that connect employees to their managers. In addition, if we want to tie this back to the business, this should be also connected to business outcomes. So however the organization is tracking its business outcomes, we should also be able to connect it back to the managers as well as the employees who are rolling up to those managers. So this data infrastructure, you need to think about what data are new and what data are existing. And what you need to be really cognizant of is how can we have the most impact with the fewest amount of data sources. Once we've identified the sources and the infrastructure necessary to get that data, then we need to think about how we're going to analyze that data and how we're going to present and visualize it. This is where the question of audience comes back in, as well as the idea of what action items will be taking place with these insights. And so for this, the key aspect that we're going to be focused on for this use case is going to be variation within the organization. So remember, our question is, where should we target our diversity and inclusion support strategies? So what we want to really identify is, are there pockets in the organization for which the climate for inclusive culture is really thriving, or other parts of the organization where it's lagging behind? So let's take a look at some initial insights from our data collection. So remember, we're doing an employee level survey, rolling them up to the managers and business areas to investigate variation in the organization in climate for inclusive workplace. So one thing that jumps out from the initial insight is a pretty striking difference between two sales organizations within the same firm. So the sales group 1 versus sales group 2 are showing pretty marked difference in the climate for inclusion. And so what we need to understand, going back to our business strategy, is this difference meaningful? And what do I mean by that? Is if our business objective is really based on driving business outcomes, and from that we've developed an objective to foster inclusive culture, we need to understand if this difference in inclusive culture is actually meaningful for the business objectives we care about. So while these initial insights are showing some striking differences, we need to further examine whether they're meaningful in terms of our business outcomes. And once we take that step, and let's say we find out they are, then we need to better understand what's underlying these two sales organizations and why sales 1 is lagging as compared to sales 2. Are there different management styles? Are there different proportions represented in terms of demographic groups such as men and women, ethnic backgrounds, etc.? And going back to HR's objective, if we find there's differences in practices, what can we then do to support this sales organization 1 in order to better foster an inclusive climate?